When you have solid ground underneath your feet, it allows the promise of prosperity to flourish in all aspects of life. And the first step to securing such security is finding a suitable and affordable place to call home. Habitat for Humanity is a movement of people in your local area around the world, all working together to build more prosperous and vibrant communities by making sure that everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home. Their mission is to put God's love into action, to bring people together, to build homes, community, and hope, seeking a pathway of dignity, respect, and the sense of honor that comes with owning a home and providing that pathway just a little bit easier. And this week, I was thrilled and honored to be joined by my friend Amy Dunham, who serves as the Chief Communications Officer for Habitat for Humanity International, who joined me this week to talk about the homeowner ownership conundrum that we find ourselves in from a societal perspective, how Habitat is working to curb this troubling trend, and how they're working to build communities of hope, strength, and prosperity. And she's also talked about how we can all help to lend a hand when it comes to ending the cycle of poverty and giving our neighbors a hand up as they look to achieve one of the greatest dreams of anyone, home ownership. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to be with you to talk about all the good work that Habitat does. Good morning to you, and happy Friday to you, my friend.
Good morning and happy Friday.
Absolutely. No, I wanted to start our conversation by talking about affordable housing because I know back in February that Habitat for Humanity mobilized to lobby Congress to address the affordable housing sort of conundrum we find ourselves in, because I know that more than 1 in 7 Americans spend more than half of their income on housing. And I know it was important for you to lobby the government in the states to address that issue. So I wanted to talk about affordable housing and the issue at hand when it comes to that to start our conversation this morning.
Yeah, it's a complex issue, and affordable housing has gotten more out of reach just before the pandemic that really spiked housing prices across North America and across the world for that matter. The challenge is not just the prices, though, it's the supply. We've been underbuilding since the housing bubble burst in 2008. So it's a complex problem. And so when we gather on Capitol Hill in the US every February for Habitat on the Hill, we're talking to members of Congress about the imperative of addressing this, not just at the federal level, but at the state and the local level as well. Because it's not just the price of homes, construction and construction loans are hard to get, and the supply chain. So there's a lot of complexities to it. So it really needs to be to address the problem from a lot of different angles. So not just subsidies for home buyers, but also for taking a look at what are the supports that builders need? What are the zoning recommendations that need to be changed? What are the, all of the permitting things, all of the things that need to happen for a house to get built and to have it make good business sense for developers, not just nonprofits. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. The good news is that the housing crisis it's very much a topic of conversation now. Every mayor in America is talking about it. The recent election in New York City, the new mayor of New York talked about affordability. That was the whole platform. So we're really trying to lean in to the fact that this is a real conversation now to talk about viable solutions, the things that we're seeing by merit of having worked in local communities across this country for almost 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that one of Habitat's solutions is discussing the homeowner supply accelerator, which is the innovative federal policy that Habitat has come up with to talk about how we design rapidly and increase the construction and rehabilitation of affordable starter homes, my friend. So what do you think people need to know about this innovative initiative, my friend?
So the good news is that we are seeing legislation now advance. Our CEO, Jonathan Reckford, was just on Capitol Hill on Wednesday of this week, participating in a press conference about two different bills that are advancing through both the House and the Senate and will hopefully come together and be reconciled. I think as many of us learned through the most recent US government shutdown here in the US, a lot of local and state budgets are actually made up of federal money. So it's really, really important for the federal government to allocate funding toward affordable housing supply. And that means not just homeowners, but builders and developers as well, because that's where the challenges are. They're across the whole spectrum. So we're really excited about this legislation and have support for it across our network. So we're really trying to raise it with members of Congress, knowing that this is a priority at all levels of government.
Yeah, and just before I ask you about the Carter Work Project, Amy, I'm curious to ask you about what's the one message that you hope resonates with the members of government when it comes to affordable housing. What's the one message you hope that resonates from all the advocacy work that Habitat has and is currently doing, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
To that, I would say that this is solvable. When we come together and solve this with public-private partnerships and in conversations with communities about what they need, we can make progress on this. It can feel like an intractable problem, but it doesn't have to be. There are real things that we can do as the nonprofit sector, as the government sector, as the private sector to help address this. And it's what constituents are asking for across the country. It is solvable. So we shouldn't just admire the problem, but talk about solutions. And we really think this homeownership supply, this affordable supply accelerator is a means by which to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that earlier this year in Austin, Texas, you had the first Carter Work Project since the former president's passing, my friend, where you brought volunteers from around the world to build 25 affordable, energy-efficient homes in Austin, my friend, and I'm wondering your thoughts on how that project went and what you want the public to know about it, my friend.
So yes, the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter Work Project dates back to 1984. And so for the first 35 years, the Carters participated in it. They retired from public life back in 2020. So we've had a few Carter Work projects since they retired from public life, but this was the first one since President Carter had passed. So it was particularly bittersweet for us for that reason. But it's really wonderful to get hundreds of people together and really demonstrate what we can do when we come together and really drive change. Getting 25 houses either started or completed is a really magical thing to experience. And I'm personally very involved. My team plans that event every year. And so we're really involved in it. And this was a really cool one down in Austin where it's in a huge geothermal neighborhood. So we're building a certain number of homes, but there's hundreds of other homes and it's all tapping into geothermal heat and water, which is a really cool way to be sustainable, but make that really accessible so that it's not just a luxury item. So the project went really well. And And it's great because Austin, they were building like 25 houses a year total in recent years, and now they're planning to build 75 houses this year. So anytime we can do something that helps really juice what our affiliates are able to do in their communities, we're really excited to be able to support that.
There's nothing wrong with pouring gasoline on a good fire, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And my friend, I wanted to talk to you about low income housing in terms of black and rural communities because they face more discrepancies than most of the population, and I know that Habitat supports things like homeowner assistance programs and other initiatives to sort of open up the floodgates of opportunities so that rural and low income residents can also be seen in the housing conversation. So I'm wondering if we could take a minute to talk about low income housing, black people, and rural communities and the role and impact Habitat has in that regard as well.
Yes, that's a really broad question. So yes, the data is really clear on the home ownership gaps between different racial groups in our country. White families have more wealth and more home ownership than any other minority group, and it's particularly pronounced for Black families. And so those gaps are real, and they've persisted through time because of a history of policies that blocked people out of homeownership. And so addressing those and addressing that generational wealth gap and dearth of homeownership is a big part of what we do to really, you can't solve a problem that you can't name and address. And so the supports to families can be things like estate planning, critical repairs so that aging homeowners can stay in their homes and pass along the intergenerational wealth of the value of that asset as a home. So some of it's very straightforward of counseling around finances, but then it's also the advocacy and the policy changes. There are still places where you need to take a look at the zoning restrictions and the deed restrictions, making sure that people have clear tenure on their deeds and things. So it's a range of supports to help close that gap and educate families about what are their options and opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And even from a Canadian perspective, we found here in Canada, my friend, that 7 out of 10 Canadians can't afford their monthly housing costs, while 71% of Canadians view owning a home as one of their top priorities, my friend. And I know that it's important for Habitat to provide a pathway for these Canadians to do that. So I'm curious, what comes to mind when you hear those statistics and the urgency of Habitat's work here in Canada, my friend? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I mean, that's a massive gap. If 7 in 10 can't afford it, but a huge population also wants to own their home, wants to own their own home, that's an important gap to close. Habitat couldn't possibly close that gap on its own, building and doing our work on our own. So I think there's a lot of things that Habitat can contribute. One of the key things that we've learned through a lot of the research that I've done around where is the opportunity for Habitat, some of it's the very basic fact of giving people hope that it is solvable. So we want to talk about the solutions that exist and name the problems and find ways forward. So whether that's advocacy for new policies, for funding, but also just for people to understand what their options are and to get smarter. I joke sometimes that housing can feel like high level adulting. And so how do you help get people smarter about financial instruments and mortgages and zoning and the things that feel really complicated? How can we take the trust that people have in our brand to help get them smarter? So even if they are not a Habitat homeowner, how can we contribute to people's sense of hope and helping them better navigate the options that are available to them and to get ready as their life goes on? Because now the average age of homeownership in North America is more like 40, whereas it used to be in the early 20s. The young 20s. So that's really something where we're helping people navigate in a changed environment, and giving a sense of hope is important.
Yeah, and more broadly, you brought up young people. I'm curious about your perspective on how we can provide younger people a better sense of stability and sort of security in the pursuit of building or owning their own home. What are your thoughts on how we provide a pathway to home ownership for young people specifically, my friend?
So that's a whole range of solutions. It's absolutely addressing the supply of affordable homes, but it's also the policy change and educating young people. So about what their options are. So if your parents are homeowners, you can look to them for advice on how to navigate and how to support. But if you don't have somebody in your family or social network to look to, how do you know how to navigate it? And so it's really important to help people understand. So that's really going to be our strategy as we head into our 50th anniversary next year, to really try to invest in helping share more information and educate younger people about what those opportunities are for them and how they can prepare, and also just where they can put their efforts to help drive the change that they wish to see in the world. So really invite people to the movement to bring home within reach for everyone. So it's a complicated question, and it's going to be different whether you're in a rural community or an urban community, wherever you might be. But we really just want to be engaging with young people to talk about what the issues are and some of the solutions and how they can themselves get smarter.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Avery, I know that ensuring resilience is a top priority for the folks at Habitat for Humanity International, and I want to draw your attention to the philosophy of the former Habitat Canada president Mark Rogers, who said that he believes that Habitat's work is more than just providing shelter. It's also about providing ground underneath the feet of the people that they serve in order to provide stability, my friend. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that sentiment and how it drives the work that Habitat does each and every day, my friend.
So it's both literal and it's also philosophical. So, for example, we have a project in Latin America called 100,000 Floors to Play On. And if you shift from a dirt floor to a concrete floor, so a foundation, that literal, that basis, you can put your child down on the ground. And so early childhood development improves, life-threatening diarrhea decreases and stuff. So the impacts of a safe, secure home have such clear, measurable outcomes on education, on health, on well-being, on mental health. And so it's really, so I couldn't agree more with Mark Rogers on that it's that sense of safety and security and a foundation on which to build your life, but also having something that is livable. Because a lot of our work around the globe is really more addressing the adequacy of a home, even more so than the affordability of the home, because many people around the world self-build their homes. I was just in Guatemala a couple weeks ago, and most of a majority of the homes in the country have like tin roofs. And so it's really about improving the adequacy of homes, not just the affordability. So the range of work that we do around the world, in some cases, is about literally providing that foundation. But across all that we do, it's that philosophical notion of building a foundation to build your life on your own terms. That's at really the heart of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Avery, I want to talk to you about diversity, equity, and inclusion because I know that Habitat recently introduced their beloved communities grant, where you got some money to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know this because I was lucky enough to attend the first Building Bridges Summit on behalf of the affiliate here in Windsor Essex as a member of their board of directors. So I'm curious about why it's important for Habitat to invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, my friends.
So this is a conversation that I think is really constructive to make it practical. What do we mean by what do we do with these grants? What we heard very clearly from our network is that they needed to build more trust in their communities. So historically, Habitat has been great at volunteer engagement, but more uneven on community engagement. So this was about participating, and this program started back in 2022, and it's really about taking affiliates on a journey of how do you actually build trust in communities. So I know that that session that you went to, that conference that you went to, was in York, South Carolina, which is actually where my parents live. Small world. And the local affiliate leader there, Tim Veek, he started showing up at the community fish fry, which is predominantly a Black community event, and he is a white man. And he showed up there without asking them for anything. And so it's a matter of just how do you build trust? Because you're going to come up with better solutions and better ideas if you talk to the people who know what the needs are in the community. Back in a former life of mine, I worked in counterterrorism, and community policing was a big part of what was important. You have to listen to the community about what their needs are rather than come in and say, here's how we're going to focus on doing policing. The more that you can be connected with relationally with a community, you're going to better meet their needs. That's true across housing, policing, policy, everything you could possibly do. So it's about supporting our network and being more trusted and connected to their communities, because that's where you get better outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And out of personal curiosity, I also wanted to ask you about the what the Habitat does to build more affordable housing for persons with disabilities. Because, I personally have cerebral palsy, and I serve on the board of directors here in Windsor partly because I wanted to bring an inclusive voice to the discussion of home ownership for folks with disabilities. So I'm curious about Habitat's commitment to serve the special needs community as well.
Well, a home should be the place where you are safe and comfortable and be able to be your most authentic self. If you have difficulty navigating within your own home, that's going to be just a layer of frustration and difficulty that we can remove. So we have lots of great partnerships on helping modify homes and update homes, particularly as people age, so that they can have the mobility that they need. I was just in Guatemala a few weeks ago, which is a wonderful country, and we do lots of amazing work. We've helped over 1 million people in Guatemala alone. Every time I leave the United States, I am mindful that the Americans with Disability Act does not exist everywhere, because there aren't ramps everywhere, and just it can be so challenging to navigate the world. And so just really being intentional that at least in the home, that it's something that we're really intentional about how we design homes so that people can stay in their homes. That's what's so important. We don't want to have people cycle through. How can it be a place where they can stay healthy and retain the value of that asset? So it's a big part of what we do, because some people start their lives with disabilities. Many others develop them as their lives go on. And so it's really important for us to understand what are people's needs as they go through that cycle, that life cycle of the journey of homeownership and living in a space that meets their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know one of the other initiatives that is important to Habitat is your global village trips. You, as you referenced, just returned from Guatemala a couple of weeks ago, and our CEO here in Windsor, Fiona Coughlin, she just returned from a recent trip to Brazil, my friend. So I'm wondering if you can talk about the importance of the global village trips and why that is so important to the work that Habitat does, my friend.
So I'll take a step back for a second. It's when we talk about what we do at Habitat, it's threefold. We are trying to build more and better homes. We're also trying to help change the systems around housing so it's easier for more people to access housing and for more people beyond Habitat to build affordable housing. And the third important thing that we do is we inspire action for housing. And there are very few ways to inspire action for housing that are more effective than getting on a build site, particularly on a build site outside of the United States. So Global Village is an amazing program to learn, develop empathy and curiosity, and really understand what housing needs are in different parts of the world, because it's very different than it is in North America. So Global Village is a fantastic program where you could get to meet some new people, learn about a culture and the needs in that community, and then help a family build their home alongside them. So it's a really transformative experience. And everybody I've ever spoken to that's gone on a global village trip comes away saying that they took away more than they gave. They learned more and gained more from the experience than they feel like they contributed to the house that they built. So it's really meaningful for participants and for the families.
Yeah, absolutely. And every time I'm curious about diving into what it means to Habitat to be a home ownership innovator. And what I mean by that is embracing innovation as we sort of look to address this housing affordability issue that we're dealing with both in Canada and the U.S. And I'm curious, what does it mean to you, and how do you define home ownership sort of innovation, my friend?
So it's a really interesting question, and it reminds me of a comment that one of our board members made recently that really stuck with me, that innovation doesn't need to be like a fancy new technology. It doesn't need to be holograms and AI. An innovation could be using a banana leaf to get water closer to where you need it. So innovation takes lots of different forms. And we work really diligently to meet the needs in the communities where we work. We're in more than 60 countries around the world, and the needs, what the innovation look like is very different. In India, we're testing innovations that are more cool roof technologies to help keep it from getting too hot inside a home. And so how do you make sure that you're managing the temperature? In colder places like Ukraine, where we're doing tons of repairs because of the ongoing war in Ukraine, how do we actually bring in insulation? And so the innovations can even just be confirming to people that their home is safe to move back into. On the affordability front here in Northern America, a lot of what it has to do is having conversations. A lot of the resources from the federal level go towards affordable rental and trying to get the greater mix towards things that are affordable home ownership as well, which is really what we're trying to drive with this accelerator that we're driving from a federal level. But really trying to partner with developers and identify places where we can have affordable housing be part of larger developments that are being built. So it's a range of things, and it's all rooted in being responsive to the needs and the dynamics in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the newer programs that Habitat sort of leaned into is the home repair program, allowing more people to stay in their existing homes and to serve more people and make sure that they can stay in their houses. So tell me about the importance of the home repair program and the impact it's making, my friend.
So my personal first experience with Habitat was doing a critical home repair program in my teen years, and we went to Indianapolis, where interestingly I ended up living for 10 years in my adult life. But there were temporary houses that were built after World War II that were only supposed to be there for a couple of years, but there were veterans still living in them 50 years later. And they were in appalling shape because they were not built to last. And so the repairs that we made to those homes, we find people that are living, without plumbing, living in tiny corners of their house because there's roof leaks and stuff. It's really negatively impacting their lives. They're not comfortable having people over because they're embarrassed. So the degree of impact that it has on people's health and well-being, it's so important to make these critical repairs. And particularly when building new homes has gotten so expensive, and that there aren't affordable options for people to move out of and into, maintaining and updating those homes has become increasingly important. So that's something we've been leaning into hard for probably the last decade. And it's really grown to be an important part of what we do so that people can maintain that home ownership asset, maintain the value in the neighborhood, and then give back to the community in that way. So it's a big part of what we do.
So we'll move on because you know that I recently attended the Building Bridges Summit in South Carolina, as you had mentioned, my friend. And one of the things that I had taken stock on, my friend, is how Habitat is really a pillar of the community, specifically in that community as well, because it was 93%, African American, and everywhere I went during the summit, people talked about how the local affiliate is sort of a pillar of the community. So, for a broader perspective opinion, my friend, I'm curious to ask you about the sense of community and a sense of how Habitat is really a community pillar of both economic growth, but also community understanding as well. What are your thoughts there?
So, being connected to the community is a big part of what makes Habitat special and also what makes us effective. So, in the seat that I occupy, stewarding the brand is part of my remit. The brand happens locally, and that's really where the trust comes from in the way that our local affiliates show up every day and consistently over time and listen with curiosity and empathy for what the community's needs are and then help them advance those goals. So that's really, I think, the magic of Habitat. And, we joke at Habitat that if you've seen one affiliate, you've seen one affiliate. Every community is different. So HFHI, Habitat International, we can get invited to a seat at the UN, but I will never get invited to a seat in York County, South Carolina, but Tim will be. So it's so important that we have that local presence and show up locally, consistently, living within our values, because that's really where the strength of the brand comes from and our ability to build relationships and to build more.
Yeah, and I've got two questions left for you, and the first of those two questions is this. When you have a safer community to live and work in, my friend, economic development and growth naturally happen. So I'm curious about your perspective on what Habitat's role is in creating economic growth and expansion, and the role that you hope that Habitat International plays moving forward on the national stage when it comes to talking about home ownership, the ability to afford homes, and the rest. So, what are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, so I'll look back to the Carter Work Project in Austin as an example of this. In Austin, there's been this huge influx of tech and companies, and so home prices in Austin have absolutely exploded in the last year. And so, but for the people that make a community vibrant and support the development of the community, work in these new factories, work in these new plants, they can't afford to live in the city. So we have a responsibility, and we see this in a lot of other places as well, that school teachers and public service workers, police officers, firefighters can't afford to live in the cities where they work. And so there's a real need to address that and make sure that there is the opportunity for people who make a community vibrant and safe can actually live in the communities where they work. So that's a big part of the conversations that we take to the private sector and to community leaders about, like, look, this isn't charity. This is what benefits the whole community for the people of this community to live here.
Yeah, and I mean, just on a broad perspective, I think a lot of people know that Habitat builds homes for deserving people, but wanted to give you the space to talk about some of the misconceptions or myths that you want people to be aware of when it comes to the important work that Habitat does. What do you think people need to know about the entire Habitat process? Because it's much more than building homes, isn't it?
It absolutely is. So it's funny being in this role. I am constantly talking to folks on airplanes and, Uber drivers and stuff like that. And people, I joke that when I say that I work for Habitat, I get a head tilt. I get a like, oh, it's like you just showed somebody a puppy. So people love us, but they don't really understand what we do. And so I'm always interested for when I can get people to go from the head tilt to a little bit more of the head snap, like, oh, I didn't realize that you did that. So yes, we build and repair, but we also finance homes. Habitat homeowners are homeowners. They pay a mortgage. We do not give away homes. We work outside the country on things like land tenure for women. We do things like, we actually in Kenya have a home improvement show that's on television to help people learn how to self-build their own homes. So we do lots of different things to meet the needs of communities. We have fielded a microfinance fund of $100 million that's created affordable housing as a global asset class. So we're doing all kinds of different things because we changed the core question that we ask about 15 years ago from how many houses can we build to how can we meaningfully impact the housing deficit in the communities where we work. And so that's expanded us into a whole broad range of work around advocacy and market development and policy that we hadn't been in previously. And that's where a lot of where our impact comes from. So really encourage people to take a fresh look at Habitat because there's lots of ways to get involved and there's lots of reasons to get excited about the fact that we can help solve the housing crisis if we work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Avery, my final question for you this morning has to do with the future of Habitat and how you envision the future of Habitat's work. What has you most excited about it and hopeful about it? And how can people get involved if they're so inclined to do that, my friend?
So we are heading into our 50th anniversary in 2026, which is really exciting. And we have a lot of things planned. We want to recognize volunteers, both past and present, that have built with us. We also want to highlight that there's a lot of different ways to volunteer. You're a volunteer. You serve on the board, bringing your acumen and skills and support. So that kind of skilled volunteering is extremely important. We need bright people from all different industries and experiences to help inform our work. So we want to recognize the people that contribute to our mission. We want to educate people about how housing has changed and what they can do and get smarter on. We want to release a research product next year that helps people better contextualize what does housing opportunity look like across the world. So there's lots of ways to get involved. Learning more is the easiest one. Finding opportunities to volunteer, whether that's skilled volunteering, donating to your local restore, coming and building with us. We talk often that participation is our superpower because there's that opportunity for people to get involved. So I would encourage anyone to take a look at their local affiliate. We're in communities all over North America. Look at what the opportunities are to get involved with your local Habitat affiliate.
Absolutely. Well, Amy, I want to tell you it was certainly a delightful pleasure to spend some time with you this morning, talking about the important work that Habitat does, my friend. I want to thank you for being an effective, enthusiastic, and thoughtful communicator in Habitat's message. And I want to thank you for being here this morning. It's most appreciated, my friend.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Kevin. I'm so delighted.